And we're back to IGN's E3 live show, streaming at you on e3.ign.com. In our next game, the adventures of Alex Mercer continue, but it may be a little different than you expected. Damon is now on hand to see Prototype 2.
Thanks, Naomi. Prototype 2 is being designed as a game to play when you've had a really bad day. And here to tell us about it is Matt Armstrong, design director on Prototype 2. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
So let's get the footage going, and you can tell us what you're up to with Prototype 2.
Sure. So I think most obvious new thing in the game is that we have a brand new protagonist this time around in the form of Sergeant James Heller. And he's somebody who was effectively a victim of Alex Mercer in the first game. He's somebody who's watched his home city of New York be absolutely ravaged and decimated by the virus, and he's also lost his wife and child to it. So he's now got a bit of a burning determination to take Alex Mercer down. And what we're seeing here is some footage from our vertical slice, which will show off some brand new powers and abilities. The first thing that we're going to see here is something that we call the biobomb, which allows Heller, who's currently in disguise as a Blackwatch soldier, to turn somebody into a living, walking, viral time bomb. So what we're going to do here is sneak up behind the guy with the red marker on his head, and then we'll grab him, poke him in the back of the neck, and then see what happens next.
I like this bit a lot. This is really good. So this is a very gruesome game.
It's a pretty effective area denial tool. It's pretty cool. And what that allows us to do here is grab the scientist and consume him for his memories without a single shot being fired in our direction. So you approach that situation fairly stealthily. There are real rewards there. And of course the Web of Intrigue memories are back again from the first game as a way of just supporting the underlying narrative and sort of informing you more about what's going on in the game at any given point.
There's some role reversal going on because Alex Mercer, the character you played in the first game, is now the bad guy, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the coolest new things that we've brought to Prototype. Personally, I've never seen that in a game before, this idea of taking the hero of the first game and making him the villain the second time around. So what we're seeing here is a way of empowering the player to find their own content within the world. We have this concept now of Blackwatch operations and key personnel associated with them. And you can use Heller's new hunting ability to basically send a pulse of energy out into the world, which will then radiate back off your target, enabling you to find the target without us having to do anything as artificial as place a target marker over the top of their head. And so again, you consume somebody and you gain a memory, but whereas in the first game getting a memory was an end unto itself, this time around getting a memory actually unlocks a brand new mission in the world, so players are really free to be able to drive their own path through the story this time around. And so moving on, what we're seeing here now is the mission that we've just unlocked, and of course brand new power in the shape of the tendrils.
Powers, yeah.
Tendrils are pretty much my favorite thing in the game.
Great.
They're so crazy and over the top and so procedural, you never ever see the same thing twice, which is really, really cool.
Here
and then of
ripping
course,
the rocket launcher off the tank and using it against its previous host.
Yeah, and why not?
Yeah,
it just fits into our IP perfectly.
Are we going to see footage of the tendril kills? How you can pull people apart with your tendrils?
Yeah, for example, just like so.
That's wonderful.
And then you'll also see that a little bit more in the next section that we jump into, which is one of our underground layers.
Now you have a new system for giving missions to the player, right? They hack into, is it BlackNet?
Yes, BlackNet.
Okay.
And BlackNet is kind of the secure encrypted communications network that Blackwatch use to communicate with their troops out in the field. But it also contains information about all of their ongoing operations in the green, yellow and red zones and the key personnel associated with them. And it's by hacking into that that you end up sort of identifying the targets that you're going to hunt down in the open world. And what we just saw very briefly there was also the fact that by completing that mission and shutting down that operation, the player gained a mutation, which is very much like a perk. So dependent on your play style and what your choice of perk actually is, but my James Heller is going to be very different to your James Heller by the time you finish the game.
Looks like there have been many graphical improvements made to the game.
Yeah, we've improved graphics in two ways, one of which is by creating a brand new rendering engine, and also we have a brand new art director for Prototype2 who's done an absolutely stunning job to this point. We're really proud of the way that the graphics are going this time around, and we feel like we're knocking it out of the park.
Here he's going into a lair?
Yeah, this is an underground lair. It's basically an infected breeding chamber, and from a player's standpoint, it's also kind of an underground treasure chest. So by consuming certain enemies, in this example, a spiked brawler, you can actually upgrade your powers this time around. You can make your blade bigger, faster, sharper, more deadly. And you'll also see here that players are much more in control of the combat this time around. You can always see which enemy is the most important one in the environment, the most deadly one, and you can see the attacks coming and react to them using things like the tactical dodge to leap over the top, and you have that moment of slow motion to really to be able to reassess the battlefield and decide what it is that you want to do next.
You can hack limbs off enemies, cut them in half.
Yeah, like dismemberment is another big key feature that fits perfectly into our world. But it's not just aesthetic. For example, if you take the leg off an enemy, it'll move much more slowly through the environment. And if you take the arm off it, then it will limit its attacks to something more manageable.
There's certain enemies where you cut their legs off and their torso will still crawl to you as like a walking landmine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Our enemies are fairly resilient and determined, and they're going to keep coming back at you until they're done. And what you're now seeing is our juggernauts, which are two of our brand new enemies. And these guys, you really don't want to get too close to. So the best way to deal with them is to stand back and really use the tendrils to deal with them, keep them at arm's length. Or just rip their arms off is even simpler. Yeah, that works too.
Now, a lot of our readers have been asking us, is there going to be any multiplayer in Prototype 2?
That's something that we talked about a lot at the beginning of the project, but ultimately we decided that it was basically to compromise us from a production schedule point of view. We wanted the opportunity to really execute the hell out of the single player experience and make it as polished as we could possibly make it. And multiplayer was basically going to prevent us from doing so. So while multiplayer is interesting to us in the long term, it's not something that we're including with Prototype 2.
What do you think the balance between running story missions and just messing around in the open sandbox world will be?
I think it very much depends on the individual player. It's not something that's really prescribed. But what we have tried to do is make sure that all of the various upgrades that you get throughout the game are kind of spread throughout the open world content as a way of enticing the player to want to explore the open world, to try and find things like lures and a bunch of the other open world content that we've actually got in there.
This is a new, larger enemy you have in the game, yeah?
Yeah, it's fairly big.
Do you have a name for this
Not
guy
the
yet?
prettiest. We're calling him Tiny for the time
Tiny, that's
being.
pretty good, yeah. That's really good.
Me being English, I like to think I bring a sense of irony to the team.
I appreciate that.
But yeah, not a subtle enemy. So yeah, that's kind of a sneak peek of where we're at with Prototype 2 at the moment.
So that's planned for next year?
That's planned for next year, yeah, we'll be out sometime in 2012.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thanks for coming on to the show today.
No problem at all, it's been great.
Prototype 2, new hero, new powers, new enemies. You'll get to play it all next year. Back to you, Naomi.
All right, thanks a bunch, guys. And for our viewers out there, how did that game look to you? Let us know by following @IGN on Twitter and using the hashtag E3. Now, it's been a great day, but we've saved something big for the end. Stay tuned for BioShock Infinite.